one who loves what is good, one who is self-controlled, upright, holy, disciplined. He must hold firmly to the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. For there are many rebellious people, mere talkers and deceivers, especially those among the circumcision party. They must be silenced because they are ruining the whole household by teaching things that ought not to be taught, and that for the sake of dishonest gain. These were Jewish individuals who had become Christians, but also said you got to be circumcised to really be a Christian. If you're not circumcised, you're not a true Christian. If you're not following all the Old Testament Jewish laws, you're not a Christian. So they were putting extra laws on people. And today, do we ever do that with each other in the church? I mean, in the church in the past we have. We got to come a certain way, look a certain way, worship has to be done a certain way. It's all these thou shalt nots, and we've forgotten that Christ came to fulfill every jot and tittle of the law. Amen. So Paul says they got to be silenced. They ought not to teach. Even one of their own prophets has said the Cretans, meaning those people who live on Crete, are liars, evil brutes, lazy gluttons. How many of us would like it if somebody called us a liar, lazy, and a glutton? I don't think we would like it. Well, Paul here is quoting a poet from 500 BC from Crete, who says the people on Crete are lazy and liars and gluttons. So Paul is using a secular, a non-faith-filled author to make his point. This testimony is true, therefore rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in their faith and will pay no attention to Jewish myths or to the commands of those who reject the truth. To the pure, all things are pure, but those who are corrupt and do not believe, nothing is pure. In fact, both their minds and consciences are corrupted. They claim to know God, but by their actions they deny Him. They are detestable, disobedient, unfit for doing anything good. Whew, quite a list there. I want us to look this morning just at the verses 6 through 9. And we're going to look at what an elder is called to be. But again, I'm not talking about just those who stood up. If you have taken the name Christian to be Christ-like, you're saying that you espouse to, you desire to, you want to become more Christ-like, which is more God-like. And these are some attributes that we're called to have growing within our hearts. It's interesting, too, the word elder is most of the time referred to as a man, but there is once in the New Testament it is also referred to women, which is wonderful because we have female elders, and it refers to all of us this morning. Well, what Paul here says is an elder must be blameless. An elder must be blameless. One who cannot be called into account. One who cannot be accused of anything. I love the fact that when Jesus is with Pilate, as we talked about last week, when Pilate says, "What is truth?" And Jesus says, "Well, I am the way, the truth, and the life." And Pilate eventually turns and says, "I find no fault in this man." How many of us could actually say that there's no fault in us? Or that we have no sin? The reality is we all do have sin. But what Paul is calling you and I to is to allow that godliness, godlikeness to grow in our lives because we are created in God's image. Later on we're going to see that we often choose whether we're going to sin or not. So what Paul here is saying is, I want you to be blameless. I want you to strive. I want you to try to live a life that can't come back and haunt you later on. How many politicians that we've known in the last many years, they've done something years earlier, and then it comes back to haunt them when they run for office? It happens. How many of us maybe haven't done something within our life, and years later down the road, it can come back to haunt us as to what we did? And the trick is not to do that thing in the first place. to learn to be blameless in the first place. So Paul here says, I want you to be blameless. He also says, I want you to be the husband of one wife. Not plural marriages. I want you to be married to one individual. One at a time. One, that's it. Not multiple. This is not, oh, let's have a man have multiple wives. No. God created Adam and Eve. And for this reason, He created them and they came together and became one. So Paul says you're supposed to be the spouse of one spouse, a husband of one wife. And then it's interesting because he says, children are to believe and not wild and disobedient. Now, those of you that have raised your kids like I have or are in the process of raising kids, sometimes I felt like I probably shouldn't be an elder or pastor. Just with this one right there. I know there's a few of you that over the last 10 years we've talked to you, and there's a couple of you that said, PG, we probably shouldn't do it right now because our kid has been involved in this and that and this. And it's like, yeah, that's a tough call. It's a tough call because our kids have their own free will, do they not? They choose what they want to do. But I think what Paul here is saying is not necessarily that we have puppets for kids. We can't have a puppet for a child. But that we're called as a parent to lead them in the right way. There's the billboard just north of Schoolcraft. I heard the saying lots. Most of you have heard it too. A family that prays together stays together. In other words, do prayer together. In other words, come and worship together. I was talking with somebody recently, and they were talking about they don't have kids yet, and they were talking about when they raise their kids, they're going to send them to school and blah, blah, blah. And then the person said, and we're going to give them the choice about going to church or not as they grow up. When they're in elementary school, middle school, we're going to give them the choice. If they want to, we'll take them. If not, we won't. And I said to them, some of you have heard me say this before, do we give our kids a choice about attending school? And the person said, no. I go, oh. And they go, well, what does that have to do with anything about attending church? And I said, well, do we give the kids a chance to say no to go to school? And they said, well, no, but what does that have to do with what we're talking about with church? And I just smiled and said, think about it. Go home and think about it. Our call as a Christian, we don't give the kids the choice about school. I don't think any of us do, right? I mean, none of you have said you could, if you don't want to go to school, don't go to school. But we tend to, in our society today, say, oh, man, if the kids don't want to go to church, it's okay, just stay home, just sleep in, just do what, don't worry about it. It's your choice. Biblically, it ain't a choice for parents to say to kids. Paul says, raise your children in the way of the Lord. He also then says, for a second time, we are to be blameless. He stresses this, the idea of blameless. Okay, we're going to go on here. And hopefully, a lot of you don't think I'm just giving a dictionary lesson this morning, that you tuned me out, because all of these ideas are really important. Paul sort of breaks it up here in three different ways. The first way is what we are not called to do or to be. The first is not overbearing. The Greek here for overbearing means somebody who thinks they are a know-it-all and they never listen to anybody else's ideas. Any of you know people like that? Are any of you people like that? It's interesting, to sit on teams or committees or groups or talk to people in the lobby or in the community and to listen, and some people are know-it-alls. They are overbearing. It's like you just want to say, would you please just shut your mouth and listen to me? Just listen. Well, that's what Paul is saying here, that there are people, and as a Christian, we're called not to be overbearing. We're called not to have that unpleasant personality that when we show up, that people really don't want to talk to us because we're going to talk all the time, because we know it all.